Welcome, everyone, to the B2B Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host, and today we've got a really interesting perspective on the world of marketing. It comes from Anne Gherini, and Anne has a fantastic background that really isn't matched by anybody else that I've ever talked to. Starting out in marketing with B2C marketing, moving into B2B marketing, enterprise SaaS marketing, now in the world of startup and at a venture company and working with startups who don't necessarily have marketing as a core competency. And how does that play as a core competency of that business and the growth? And you've made investments, hard dollar investments and expecting ROI. And you're consulting with these companies on a number of different levels. But we're going to talk about what you talk to them about in terms of marketing today. But before we get into that, if you wouldn't mind just giving us a little bit more than my brief explanation of your background as we get started here.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Steve, for having me. So first off, yeah, my career actually started in the entertainment industry way back when. And I learned very quickly both what a cutthroat industry actually is and also how to work with some of the biggest brands in the world. And then I transitioned over into tech, moved up here to Silicon Valley. And like you said, I ran marketing teams for the last decade, started on the B2B or B2C side, and then transitioned and spent the latter part of my career leading SaaS B2B businesses. And I transitioned over to the venture world recently. And the reason, so I work at Sierra Ventures. We're an early stage venture capital firm focused on the future of enterprise technologies and the next frontier of actually, can I state that?
Yeah, sure. We'll cut that out. No problem.
Okay, let me just say it again. So I moved over to venture capital and I'm here at Sierra Ventures. We're an early stage venture capital firm focused on the future of enterprise. I have an interesting role here as a CMO where I get to work both with a big portion of my job is working with our portfolio companies and these early stage founders, typically who don't have any marketing support. And I get to help them kind of build the foundation for marketing and go to market in the early stage. And I also get to sit on the investment team. So a lot of what I get to do is explain to them the fundamentals of marketing and how to really build that foundation so you're ready and prepared to scale.
Well, I think that is a fantastic place to start, right? The fundamentals of marketing. So you're the CMO of this company. Like we said, you're investing hard dollars and expect a return, right? So the recommendations that you're making, this isn't like, here's the 101 guide, guys, right? No, you're actually saying, no, this is what it's going to take for you to be successful. And those insights that you're passing on in the early stage, they're not just for early stage companies, right? They, like we were talking just right before we hit the record button, there's not a CMO or a CRO that's out there that isn't revenue focused on growth, no matter where they are right now. So maybe start us off by what is the foundation that you help instill there from a marketing perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with a lot of founders, it's also understanding, hiring at the early stage. When do they need to hire that marketing leader? When do they just need to hire an IC, an individual contributor to help on marketing? And when do they, at what stage are they just needing to roll up their sleeves and do it themselves? And so, part of that is really understanding that early stage marketing mix. So how much time should you be spent on product marketing? Really, what is product marketing and what does that encompass? Because it can be defined in a variety of different ways. How do you start thinking about the foundation for demand gen or growth marketing? And then as well as the corporate PR type of marketing too. So at the early stage, a lot of it is going to be weighted on product marketing. It's really understanding, and in product marketing, it is still weighted around revenue, but it's still focused with, you've got to get that core messaging, positioning, and really understand the ICP, that's the ideal customer profile. Who are you selling to? Do you truly have product market fit? Who are the competitors? And really building out that landscape, not only for the go-to-market function, but for the entire team. And so I think that role of marketing in the early stage, whether it's led by the founder or you bring in a marketing leader to help along the way, it's building that foundation and making sure the entire company is on board with what are you building, how are you positioning it in the market, who else is in the market, and who are your potential buyers. And so I think that that's one of the key pieces when especially early stage companies get started. Again, we invest early. So we're at the seed stage. We're often that first institutional check that a founder may be getting. And so when I'm coming in, I'm really helping them build that initial foundation and try to figure out, okay, what's the next step? Because when a lot of people think marketing who haven't been in this world, it's confusing. There's a number of different, you don't want to spend all your marketing dollars on a, $10K a month PR firm that's going to get you a couple pops. And then, in the future, you don't have, a demand gen strategy or really your messaging or positioning or story or even understand your ICP. So you got to figure out what are those steps in building out this marketing mix from the very beginning.
So I'm going to come at the question now from the other side, which is having worked with tons and tons of startups, doing the kind of recommendations that you are, the ones that are successful versus the ones that aren't. What's the difference in how they adopt and execute these marketing strategies? Like, you've got learnings, right, from that. What are the learnings that come out of that?
Well, I'll speak specifically for early stage. I think, I'll start with the ones that struggle. And I think a lot of times, especially what founders face is if marketing's outside their core competency, especially go to market or even the revenue function, because they all really sit together. The biggest mistake that I see is them trying to kind of spend their way out of that problem. And they could be spending their way out of that problem by hiring a bunch of consultants, hiring agencies, hiring a very expensive marketing leader who might not be right for their company, or maybe hiring them too soon before the company is prepared to really even be able to support their skill set. And so that's the biggest mistake that I often see is people get uncomfortable and they try to spend their way out of it. And so what the most successful, especially it's interesting to see, we categorize our founders when we're looking at them kind of an L1 through 4. So an L1 might be a first-time founder, really, straight out of school, doesn't have a lot of operating experience. This is all brand new to them, to an L4 being a, serial entrepreneur, has already been there, done that. It's really fascinating because when you work with someone who, and they're both, can create incredible companies, and we have proof of a 40-year track record and venture of watching that. But those that have already been there and done it and are really experienced leaders, they're razor sharp prescriptive on what they need marketing to do and how marketing can come in and help. And I think that that's interesting, not that it typecasts, but they have that understanding of, okay, here's what we need to build. Here's the foundation that the founders need to lay out. And here's where we're going to bring that marketing leader in. And here's what they're going to be in charge of. And here's the expectations that are, tied to realities of the business. And so I think the best leaders really have that understanding coming in that, hey, marketing's not, you can't just, abracadabra and, make all this marketing magic happen. There has to be a lot of pieces that are working together. It has to be blended with the entire team. Marketing can't be a silo. And especially in the early stage, it's just such an integral part. It's woven within the entire team and culture.
Yeah, so I could see spending your way out a tactic. Oh, I need a PR agency. I need a demand gen agency. I need this. I need this. I need this. But without a vision of where the company is going, their point of view on the marketplace, where they fit uniquely in, right? That is a foundation for marketing then to accentuate. You're just going to be adding tactics onto a company that doesn't have the right foundational strategy. Is that a good takeaway from what you were just saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's not that a lot of the agencies that get hired or even consultants are bad. It's just that it's up to the founder and that early stage team to figure out, they have to be supplying these agencies or consultants in the early stage, if you decide to go that route, with all the information, with all the kind of fuel for these programs. And most of the time they just don't have it. And so you've got someone on the outside trying to figure it out. It doesn't end up working often in my experience. So what I think is a better tactic is really at that early stage, you've got to spend the time, you've got to do the reps on really figuring out those product marketing, that foundational product marketing strategy around who you are, why you're important, why you're there, and how you're going to make money at the end of the day.
Right.
And all of it in marketing, especially because we're focused on primarily B2B. So everything that we do, it's, marketing is tied to revenue. And if any marketing leader is not thinking that way, there is a gap there that you got to press into, because marketing owns revenue along with the sales leader. There isn't, I think, as you mentioned, the analogy of the old school style of marketing, when we were talking early on, of like, I got my MQL, I got my lead, now I'm going to throw it over to sales and Godspeed, that's long gone. Now it really is, sales and marketing have to be tied at the hip along with CS. And so you've got this revenue team that you're building in the early stage that all have to work together. They all have to get along too. I think friction is good. Friction is healthy. Friction makes sure you're keeping everyone honest. But at the same time, I think that team has to work together and figure out ways to really grow, and revenue has to be a piece of that. But you can't get to that revenue place until you start to figure out, that foundational messaging, positioning, who we are, who we're going after, and where we really sit in the market.
Yeah, if you don't have that vision as a founder, you can't hire that out and have somebody figure that out for your company, right? That's a lost cause. One of the things that you said in there, I think was very, very interesting. And I wanted your take on this, because, anybody that is trying to answer those questions, the highest authority for any company is the customer, right? So defining your ICP, defining the problem set that you're solving for them, why they can't solve it on their own. Why are they willing to pay for somebody to help them solve that problem? So with the founders that you're working with, and again, from this marketing perspective and setting that foundation, how important is it in recommending to them that they're actually on the phone with customers, with prospects, right? That, again, that's not an area to outsource, right? That they need to have that kind of understanding themselves. Is that an important part of what you're talking to them about and setting as that foundational strategy?
Absolutely. I mean, again, Sierra Ventures, we invest in the early stage. We start at that seed stage. A lot of times you'll have a product, you'll be, even in market, but it's still very early. And so the best founders that we see, they're obsessed with those customers. They're obsessed with the customer problem. Even more so than like obsessed with their product. It's really about what is that customer problem that they're trying to solve? What's that workflow, and truly understanding that. So I think even before you get, if you're raising venture capital dollars, even before you get there, you have to have that obsession of truly understanding who you're selling to, what is their problem, what's their workflow, and that holistic view of how they work and how they can potentially use your solution. Now, as your company progresses, any marketing leader, when I, was recently talking to, we did a roundtable of CMOs in the early stage from our portfolio. And we did this for our founders to kind of help them, again, demystify early stage marketing. Anyone that's coming into your company, one of the first things you should have them do in that first 30 days, especially in that first 60, any leader should be carving out a big piece of their time to spend with customers and prospects. whether it's shadowing calls, I think that that's always important, or shadowing sales calls, so you can understand what are these questions that are being asked, what's the resistance that's happening, or where is that kind of aha moment that they're feeling, but also really understanding from a customer perspective, how is your product, how is your solution being used in the market? And so I think that that's really important for any leader to do, whether you're the VP of engineering coming in, or you are that, CMO, VP of marketing that's coming into a company. You should be spending time alongside your other leaders, really focused on understanding who that customer is and how they use your solution.
I love how you put that you want them to be more customer obsessed than they even are product obsessed, right? Because in the end, if their product doesn't solve a problem that their customers have, then what good is it, right? And nobody's going to buy. So, one of the things that I wanted to ask is, what is the parallel that you see, this customer obsessed, right? That doesn't seem like an early stage startup only strategy, right? You've worked in the ABM, enterprise, B2B world. You're now steeped in the early stage. When you were in marketing in the other companies, these larger companies, a lot of the tactics that you're talking about here need to be adhered to there as well, right? What are the biggest differences and what are the biggest similarities that you see? Because you have you've been in both worlds. And I think that, we have in our audience here, listenership, earlier stage and later stage companies. So what is the differences and what are the big similarities in your mind?
One of the biggest differences is because I've come into a number of companies at the earliest of stages for a marketing leader and then scaled up through those growth stage. But I think the biggest difference there is that it's around the tactics of how you're able to do it. So at a later stage company, a lot of this stuff is documented. So hopefully a lot of this information around the customer, you should have, a repository of customer calls that you can listen to, and there should be documents about who is the ICP, who is the persona. So the idea is that it should be even easier for you to dive deep. I think that's still a critical piece to coming in at the later stage or coming in to run any marketing team. You have to, the first thing is you have to understand that customer and that prospect's journey. At the early stage, the biggest difference is none of that's there. So you've got to come in and you've got to figure it out. You've got to, in some cases, you've got to convince, hey, that 1AE, hey, can I jump on this call with you? I promise I won't mess it up. But I just need to listen. I need to, have some contact, or, convince that founder that, hey, our, one big enterprise customer, can I talk with our, champion over there? Can I have some FaceTime to really understand how they're using it? You've got to negotiate those relationships early on. And then hopefully in the best marketers that I see, come in and start documenting and start that process early, because as they scale out their team, their PMM that they're bringing on, or even their demand gen person that they're bringing on, they're going to need to know that information as well. So I think that the difference is really in tactics. The idea is the same. Like anytime you're going to lead a marketing team, you've really got to understand who the customer is, why your product matters to them, and what were those triggers to get them to buy. And also, I think at a later stage company, you usually see the data around, there's a lot more data that's available. And so you can be a lot more data driven, where at the early stage, you have to sometimes start producing that data. That's part of your role. Right. But understanding why, customers potentially churn. Where are the problems? Where are the gaps? And understanding that, and sometimes that, is it's 100% a product problem, that something needs to be built. Sometimes it's a communications problem. And so that's where a PMM can also kind of come in and start filling some of the delta between where you want to be and where you are today.
So I'm going to draw an inference from what you just said there. And I'm going to say that that mentality of you've got to create the ICPs, you got to create the documentation, you've got to start building all of that, before you then throw money at the problem and bringing the agencies in and everything. I can't tell you how many CMOs I talk to, but they say, and these are later stage, come in and are like, you wouldn't believe the ICPs they were going after. They didn't have the right, it wasn't stratified in the right way. And we had to totally redo that. So I think here's one of the inferences is no matter whether you're at early stage or later stage, when you come in, think about all of that foundational work as if you were at an early stage, right? At least put a critical thinking on it and say, is it right? Right? Are we in the right direction? Or have we actually been, has that been one of the problems in the company, in the growth stage of the company, is we haven't gotten some of that foundational work done? Comment on that. Would you agree on that, having been on both sides of the fence? Or
Oh, absolutely. I think that middle stage, as you're, exiting early stage and kind of going into growth, is interesting because the growth metrics that you need are still, there's a lot of demands there. And so what you see is, hey, we had great growth, and then all of a sudden, we started to plateau a little bit. So we added another, we expanded our ICP, we expanded our SAM. And sometimes it's like, at that middle stage, it's a lot about, hey, well, we sold this customer, and they're in a different vertical, so this must expand our ICP now. And so what I see a lot is like, all of a sudden you start chasing that vertical, and I've experienced this firsthand. And the marketer needs to pump the brakes, or the marketing leader needs to pump the brakes a little bit to the team. And like, yes, we had some, success here, but we need to figure out why we had success. We need to truly figure out why this, customer who's in a new vertical, or who's outside of our, ICP, before we expand it, why they actually bought it. And when you start pressing more there, it's really interesting what you can find. And again, there's a lot of work that needs to be done before you throw more dollars at, hey, let's put some AEs on this particular, new opportunity. Let's build a tiger team to build this solution. You've got to figure out, really, is this something that's repeatable? And that question of why did they buy? Why are they interested? And like, what is the use case there? Is this something that we can build a repeatable solution around? And so that's where I see it the most interesting. And probably to your point of like, where are those growth stage companies, or those growth stage leaders that come in and are, super surprised that XYZ is in their ICP and no one knows why they buy or why they haven't churned. I think that
like growth despite themselves, right?
Yeah, I have less experience in that growth stage. Like, my sweet spot is earlier. So with that, I can only imagine what the cleanup has to be. And so a true marketing leader really has to come in and ask the hard questions, and try to figure out like, what can we build on, and what is actually repeatable.
So I'm going to change direction here just a little bit. And I told you I was going to ask you this question before we hit the record button. But as a marketer, one of the most important things that you can do is create content, right? Because content is your introduction into the community that you're reaching out to. It is the fuel for demand gen. In an early stage in the companies that you're working with, if you were to put just on a rating from 1, content is not important to the growth of the company, 10, it's vital to the growth of the company, where would you put that and why?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I'm definitely in the camp of it's a 9 or it's a 10, depending on your priorities. But I think especially with marketing, once you define your messaging, define where you are in the market, and really understand your ICP, starting to generate that content is super important. So a lot of times we talk to companies that don't have big budgets. I mean, that's what I find to be the really fun piece about early stage, is that you've got to figure it out without all the resources. So sometimes it's not going to be pretty, and you're not going to have everything perfect, but you're just going to be out there testing and trying to figure out where those opportunities are. And I think there's a lot of, I personally think it's fun. Sometimes it can cause some gray hairs, but at the end of the day, the piece around content is it's free to create content. It's, as I'm sure you know, there's tons of SEO advantages as you're building out your site. And if your site is where you're sending customers to, learn about you, build your brand, and hopefully build some demand funnels. So I think that is just a critical piece. It's something that pays dividends in the future. The biggest problem is, and I've had this, happen several times when, I've either come into companies as an advisor or, came in to lead marketing teams. You start to build content and it just feels like you're, preaching to the ecosystem, preaching to, a black box. No one's actually, paying attention. You're creating this content. You think it's good content. It's out there. You're pushing it on social and you're getting nothing. Right. So I think the challenge in the early stage is, if you don't have those dollars for amplification, it's like you want this gratification for all the work and effort you're putting in. And sometimes it's not there immediately. But, what I always show is you go a few years later and all of a sudden, one of those 5 posts has gained a ton of traction and you're seeing the dividends pay out over and over and over again. And so I think that's one of the pieces that's challenging, especially for founders and early stage teams, is like, how do we dedicate all these resources? We need results today. We don't have 2 years to waste, but It is super critical to start building out that content, building out that messaging early on, just being able to test different ways of talking about your product, different ways of talking to your prospects and customers. So yeah, I find it incredibly important. My take with building content is I love to create content that can be sliced and diced in a bunch of different ways. Similarly, we do roundtables or recorded panels, and then you take that and build some social snippets, and you take that and build a blog post, and you take that and, how many different ways can you use one piece of content? And it is surprising. Some stuff gains a lot of traction, other stuff falls a little flat. And that's okay. That's part of that process. And marketing is iterative at the end of the day. It has to be, I think, not only for really early stage, but at the early stage, you get a little more, wiggle room on being able to, really take chances, and things flop. No one's really paying attention anyways. But things take off and you get that, traction, you get that, earned media that you really do need. So yeah, for me, I think content is still king or queen, however you like to put it. But, being able to start building that inbound strategy. I also think it's a great way for founders to start thinking about their prospects and customers. If you really get into their head, it's all, it's a psychology game. Like, what is the content? What are the problems that they face outside of just selling our product? Outside of just the main things that we're selling, the value prop that our product brings? What are the things that they're looking for? What are the podcasts they listen to? What are, really diving in deep to understand the buyer persona, and then building content around that to try to draw them in to your website and draw them into having that connection with your brand. So I think it's a great exercise overall. And I think today, with technology and clearly here at Sierra, we've invested in generative AI companies since 2019, before it was even called generative AI. But today, with Gen AI, there's all these advantages to being able to create content quicker. And so I think that's something that we kind of push our founders along, because some of them have great ideas, but then kind of get stuck in the analysis paralysis and get stuck in the polishing stage of trying to figure out like, it's not quite ready for prime time. And, at the early stage, you just got to keep pumping that stuff out and seeing what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, I love the idea like you talked about, like doing roundtables and then taking that, like, because a roundtable discussion, that's not going to be around product feature. That's going to be around, the industry. That's going to be around the problem set. That's going to help them, the buyers, in their journey, in their own jobs, and how they're framing and how they're even looking at their own problem, right? So that kind of content, even if it doesn't get wide distribution, but if it has the right distribution to the right decision makers, it can make a huge difference in impact. And I know we could go on a long time here, but I just want to wrap up and say, hey, thank you for coming on. But what is the final takeaway? Like, if there's one thing that we should remember from the conversation here, what would you like the audience to know?
Yeah, I think it's the biggest thing. I wrote a piece. I've been writing in Inc. magazine for, it's now been 7 years or so. And one of the recent pieces that I wrote was about what CMOs wish CEOs knew, or sorry, let me put that, what CMOs, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, we'll redo that. Yeah, go ahead.
So the question was again, like, what's the main takeaway?
Yeah. What is the main takeaway that you want the audience here from the whole conversation? If there's one thing they should take away, what should it be?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, I've been writing in Inc. magazine for the last 7 years. And one of my recent pieces was around what CMOs wish CEOs knew about marketing. And one of the reasons that it got some traction was that I think it's one of the key pieces is that the CMO really is around revenue, that the CMO and that marketing team really has to have that focus on revenue. I think another piece there is virality isn't a strategy. And so as we think about content and the building content, it isn't all about just going viral. It isn't all about the instant buzz that it could potentially create. It's about that long-term, those dividends that it'll pay in the future, and really building out that messaging and positioning. So I think all in all, marketing, whether it's early stage or later stage, there's an importance to really understanding the mix. I think a piece that we talked briefly about early on too is for marketing leaders to really, no matter what stage they're at, to have that comfort level in testing out and leaning into some of the new technologies that are arising or that can help marketing and help marketers move faster. For me, I think that, marketing or Gen AI and some of these new technologies aren't going to replace marketers specifically. They will replace the marketers that don't leverage the technology. So I feel like for me, the advantage there is being able to kind of lean into some of these technologies, lean into some of the advantages they create. They're not going to build your marketing strategy. They're not going to write all your content for you, but they can be used to kind of fill in the gaps, fill in the blanks that you need to allow you to create content faster, allow you to get those thought leadership pieces out, your thoughts or your team's thoughts, but allow you to kind of write and fill the gaps in the middle so you can write faster. So at the end of the day, I think the importance for marketing leaders and to really embrace how the role of a marketer is going to be changing in the future is critical. And for those founders out there to really see the importance of marketing at the early stage, and really the importance of building that really healthy foundation of marketing before, you're ready to scale.
Well, Anne, thank you so much for all of the insights. And once again, I'll say, you've got a very unique background and a very unique perspective, and we really appreciate you sharing all of that with us here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.